So tonight's theme, as I mentioned during that practice, is curiosity. And there's lots of good quotes on curiosity, and one of my favorites is attributed to Socrates, who said, "Wisdom begins in wonder." It's only 4 words, but it contains quite a lot in it. I guess the first question that comes up there is, well, what's wisdom? And I suppose to me, wisdom is a capacity to know reality and to be able to work with it. There's a kind of flexibility and a non-fixity, which might be knowledge, kind of, or intellect, but wisdom is a kind of something more embodied than that. A set of skills that can be and understandings that can be brought to meet the moment. And wisdom begins in wonder. That suggests that we're kind of maybe not wondering to begin with. Kind of suggests that kind of, the opposite of wisdom, ignorance, I guess, is kind of like it begins and ends in a kind of lack of curiosity. Sort of lack of curiosity, which is interestingly we often call boredom, don't we? Kind of, we call sort of the opposite of curiosity is boredom. We know that human beings have a strong predilection for habituating, for kind of becoming familiar. And when things become familiar, we can very easily start to get bored. It's kind of like same old, same old. Yeah, I know this. And at a kind of brain and mind level, we are trained to work on kind of an expectation basis. Once something has happened, we expect it to, at least to be more likely to happen again. Once something happens regularly, it starts to become, kind of part of us. An example I often use is like tying your shoelaces in the morning. At some point, you had to learn to do that, and at the time it was probably pretty difficult. It's like lots of very intricate knots, and you have to put your thumb through and then pull out from another one. It's like, it actually takes quite a long time and a lot of practice to learn to tie the shoelaces. I don't know if you remember that, or maybe some people have been through it with children or other relatives, young learners of this who don't have that skill. And then at a certain point we can do it, and before long it's automatic. You don't even think about it. You don't have to kind of, it's just embodied. It's just something that we know how to do. And so it goes on to autopilot. And, so it's very helpful that we have this capacity to train ourselves, because otherwise life would be a bit, slower, wouldn't it? If we had to kind of learn to tie our shoelaces every time, or learn to drive, or learn to cook a meal, or etc., etc. And it's also a pretty good survival skill, because the first time that we accidentally, or maybe we put our hands on a hot pan, maybe again as a child, it happens, and then we get a very strong pain reaction. It's like, oh, the brain says that wasn't good, and so there's then a resistance formed. Don't want to do that again. That's the next time we see a pan, oh, that might be hot, especially if we can feel heat coming from it, then we'll pull away. Similarly for things that we like, sort of like maybe we like chocolate. We've discovered that we like the taste of chocolate. So next time we see a piece of chocolate in the distance, we start salivating, kind of in preparation. So we kind of build these habits and these patterns based on expectation and on past learning. Curiosity, by the way, is not particularly helpful in some of these circumstances. Like if you've been burned by the pan, having curiosity that the next pan might, I wonder if that one's hot too, might not be the most sort of adaptive survival mechanism, because, you might get burned again. So that, the phrase "curiosity killed the cat" comes from this, doesn't it? However, it does leave us with a range of limitations, in that the past learning is exactly what it says, it's past, and expectation is future. So we are kind of starting to live in kind of a non-existent world, when we are seduced into believing the reality of, that the past experience is the same as what's happening now, and the future experience is what we expect it to be. And the more automatic this becomes, the more limited we are. Perhaps the safer we are in some ways. So, there's kind of can be a benefit, but, sometimes we can become so safe that actually we lose some other qualities, like joy, for example, like the possibility of change, like adventure, like flexibility of mind and body. So it's kind of like a trade-off when we give up our curiosity for the autopilot. Maybe the benefit is safety, and the the loss of various other qualities that make life really worth living. And maybe even the safety only has has its shelf life, because the safety is based on the expectation in the past experience, but things are continually changing. So we're reliant on the present moment actually meeting those expectations from the past, or the habits that we learned before, are they appropriate for now? And because things are constantly changing, the chances of that staying the same all the time, pretty small. Things will change. So we need some curiosity, at least. We need to be able to kind of switch on to curiosity, at least. I'm not saying that we have to kind of, spend our whole day watching everything that happens, because sometimes the autopilot's, the most appropriate mode. But if we don't have any choice about which mode we're in, then there are problems. Yeah. I've just started watching Strictly Come Dancing this year. And it's been going, I think, nearly 20 years. Never been remotely interested. Kind of like, I had an impression of what it would be. Celebrity show, okay, bunch of celebrities. And judges, okay, that's where people are, like judges are rude to celebrities. That's kind of like, it's probably not very nice either. And dancing, I mean, I'm not interested in ballroom dancing, or most, See, I've even got the idea that it's ballroom dancing, which actually comes from come dancing back in the 1980s, when I remember it as a child. So I've had all these ideas about what what Strictly Come Dancing would be, and had no interest in spending my Saturday night sitting in front of it, until my younger son just absolutely started loving it, and then really got into dancing and wanted me to dance with him. And kind of so completely into dancing that actually this becomes, Strictly Come Dancing becomes one of the most exciting kind of periods of his year. The idea is going to be a new series, and it's like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to just not watch it, or am I going to have an experience with him? Well, I'm having an experience with him, and hey, it's kind of fun. I'm even starting to kind of like, look out for the news and, oh, what's happening with that person? And oh yeah, they definitely improved since last week. So kind of there's a sort of benefit to I mean, I'm not claiming that I've been superbly open, because I mean, it's taken me 18 years and kind of like a pretty strong pull to get me to this place. But it's possible, isn't it, when we actually look? And there have been studies showing that actually people who consider themselves to not like certain sports, when they're actually exposed to it and they're actually given a chance to see it and understand it, and actually they discover often that they quite like it. So I guess there's a sort of question for us, isn't there? When we're not curious, what do we miss? At least the choice that we can make. the choice of actually looking in and seeing, well, actually, is this something I want to spend my time with now? So, you know, the attention that we pay to an experience changes the experience. So how we look at it affects what's going on. And so if we look with curiosity, that's going to be different than if we look with resistance or look with you know, kind of like a preconceived idea, or we simply don't look at all. We just don't, you know, it just kind of passes by in the background and we don't notice it. So if we can move to at least to have curiosity as a mode available to us, then I would like to suggest there's lots of benefits that we get to see and understand experience more clearly, coming down from the concepts that we might have about people, about TV programs, about anything at all. Like, where are we stuck? Where are we limited because we're not being curious about, you know, people with different political opinions to us? You know, kind of like, I'm not saying we all have to agree, but kind of like, isn't it interesting that someone else has this very different viewpoint? You know, kind of like, okay, I wonder where that came from. I wonder where what's happening there. And then there's the possibility, the beginning of maybe, if they're prepared to do it too, you've got the beginning of a discourse. As I mentioned, it also transforms experience in that if we bring what's sometimes called an approach mode, actually beginning to move our attention towards experiences, perhaps particularly experiences that we are not so sure about, that seems to be indicative, or at least not indicative, it seems to be conducive to well-being. The more approachful we are, kind of the less stress and suffering we experience. Including when things are difficult. Some of you might have worked with this, you know, for example, with pain in your bodies or the tendency to ruminate. Actually, when it can be included and taken an interest in, sometimes the power it has isn't so strong. And if we're interested, we can actually turn this kind of curious eye on ourselves and, you know, get interested in the experiencer. And kind of like, oh, how am I? Not just how are they experiencing the world, but how am I experiencing the world? Where might my biases be? How am I overlaying concepts onto experience? So we start to become connoisseurs of our own neuroses, to quote Ram Dass. And you know, really sort of yeah, you know, kind of like an old wine. You know, we can really smell and taste and feel who we are. And if we can know ourselves intimately, we've got more chance of making good choices. So our stance on ourselves, on the world, is different. It's kind of looking at as well as the experiencing. And it gives us more, a kind of a bigger view. And maybe if we've got that bigger view, then our problems don't seem quite as big. You know, we kind of expand the view, and then what was in here, if we're kind of closed in, that seems really big. But if we can open out and maybe see more of what's going on and experience from more space, then our difficulties are less confining and our joys are freer to be noticed, because of course we have this negativity bias that means that we're trained to see what might go wrong or might not, what might be unpleasant, quicker and more acutely than what perhaps is pleasant. So by taking a bigger view, we might be able to include more of what's around and available to us that we might be able to drink in and learn from and enjoy. So I think curiosity is also a kind of a precursor to joy, dare we say it. And so every time we're practicing meditation, we're training in this quality of interest, of non-judging, of watching and being interested in the patterns, and of staying when the urge perhaps is to pull away or resist, and to see those patterns. You know, so we get a kind of a sense of a whole picture view, or more of a whole picture view. I mean, it may not be the whole picture view, but more of a view than if we aren't willing or bothered, or perhaps simply just not trained to look. I remember when I first started learning meditation, a phrase that stuck with me that a teacher said is that, you know, he said I was looking for the meaning of life when I started meditation, and I didn't find it, but I did learn how to look, and that stuck with me. It's somehow it's learning to look. We may not find it, but at least we learn how to look. So let's move into some of the actual looking. So if you'd like to join me in a meditation practice, a curiosity practice.